Sign the papers or get out. My husband's voice was flat as he delivered the ultimatum. I looked down at the document. The language was clumsy, but the intention was clear. He wanted to take everything I had built, everything I had inherited. Without hesitation, I signed my name on the paper. The very next day, my husband called, his voice trembling. "I am Victoria Harrington." My marriage began to crack on a Tuesday afternoon, when I was homesick with a cold, wrapped in a cashmere blanket on the sofa, my laptop open beside me. Blake, my husband, had left early for what he called an important negotiation downtown, wearing the charcoal Armani suit I had bought for him. He kissed my forehead tenderly and disappeared. Around noon, the mail arrived. Normally, Blake intercepted it immediately. He had told me he was waiting for sensitive contracts. But today, he wasn't there. I flipped through the stack of papers, catalogs, bills, advertisements, and then a thick envelope from American Express. The black card account. I was the primary card holder. Blake was only an authorized user. The envelope felt too heavy for ordinary charges. I opened it. 6 pages listing itemized purchases. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands suddenly shaking. Sapphire Club, Las Vegas, $1,200. Caesar's Palace, suite upgrade, $1,800. Rolex Boutique, Las Vegas, $12,500. Delta Airlines, first class, 2 Miami-Vegas tickets, $3,400. Delano Hotel, Miami, penthouse suite, $2,800. Tiffany & Company, $4,200. I noticed the dates. The Vegas charges were from a weekend Blake had told me he was attending a silent meditation retreat, completely offline and without phone signal to preserve the spiritual authenticity of the experience. The Rolex purchase happened 3 days before my birthday, when Blake gave me a handwritten card saying that my real gift was being processed. Shipping was delayed. The Miami hotel bill was for the upcoming weekend. There were 2 guests checked in. My vision blurred. I logged into my bank account on the laptop with trembling fingers. I checked our joint account, the account I deposited money into for household expenses. In 2 years of marriage, Blake Donovan had not contributed a single cent. I checked the cash withdrawals, small amounts, ATM fees at nightclubs and casinos scattered across the statements. I heard the garage door open. Blake walked in, cheeks flushed, tie loosened. "Victoria, great news! The meeting was incredible! They're talking 7 figures, babe. This could be..." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw my face, when he saw the 6 pages of credit card statements spread across the kitchen counter. "What's this?" he asked cautiously. "This," I said, tapping one finger on the Rolex charge, "is your 7-figure investment. Who's wearing it, Blake? Because it's not on my wrist." For a split second, panic flickered across his face. Then the mask slid back into place, smooth and practiced. "Did you open my mail?" he said, his tone turning indignant. "That's a federal crime, Victoria." "This is my account," I said, my voice rising. "I pay for it. Who did you take to Vegas? Who are you planning to take to Miami?" He opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water, twisted the cap with an almost unbelievable calm. "The Rolex is an investment," he said. "I'll resell it for profit. You have to spend money to make money. The Vegas trip was a bachelor party for a potential investor. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd get irrational and jealous, just like you're doing right now. The Miami booking is for a business meeting. I hired a virtual assistant to help coordinate my deals." "You don't have a business," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't have investors. You don't have contracts. You're just draining my money. And you've exhausted me." His expression went cold, all the fake warmth evaporating. "Careful, Victoria," he said quietly. "You sound unstable. This is not how a supportive wife speaks to her husband. I'm trying to build a future for us, and you're obsessing over trivial details." $12,000 a month is not trivial. "It is for people with vision," he snapped. "Maybe that's the real problem with you. You're an interior designer, not a business person." You think small. He walked away, leaving me alone with the evidence of his betrayal scattered across the counter. That night, he slept on the couch. I didn't sleep at all. The early warning signs I had chosen to ignore were now painfully clear. Act 2. 4 years ago, I was standing at a charity gala for children's hospitals. I was 36 at the time, single by choice after a decade spent focusing on building my business, and at the peak of my career. Victoria Harrington Interiors had just landed the interior design contract for a new luxury apartment development downtown, a multi-million-dollar project that would cement my reputation as one of the leading designers in the field. However, that was what people saw. Inside, I felt lonely. I had never admitted it to anyone, but coming home every night to my parents' beautiful house, wandering alone through 6 bedrooms, was starting to feel more isolating than freeing. I was examining a silent auction item, an ugly abstract painting someone had donated with wildly optimistic expectations, when a voice behind me said, "You know, I think that painting is actually hanging upside down, and even then it doesn't help." I turned and saw a tall, broad-shouldered man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, elegant hair, and fine lines around his eyes that suggested charm and experience. He looked like he had stepped out of a luxury watch advertisement. "It's meant to evoke emotional dissonance," I replied, smiling despite myself. "It's giving me a headache," he shot back, holding out his hand. "Blake Donovan. I work in private equity and venture capital." Private equity. A conveniently vague concept that could mean many things, or absolutely nothing at all. "Victoria Harrington," I said, shaking his hand. His eyebrows lifted in what seemed like genuine recognition. "Victoria Harrington? The designer who turned that rundown warehouse into an art gallery complex? I admire your work greatly. You have an incredible eye." He knew my work. He complimented my skill and vision, not just my looks. That was the first strike, perfectly baited. We spent the rest of the evening talking. He was attentive, witty, and knowledgeable. He spoke about his time in Asia, his portfolio of promising startups, and his passion for vintage cars. He made me feel interesting, seen, and intellectually valued. When the bar tab arrived later at the hotel lounge, he theatrically patted his pockets. "I'm so embarrassed," he said, genuinely flustered. "I changed jackets at the last minute and left my wallet behind, Victoria. I'm truly mortified." "It's fine," I reassured him, handing my credit card to the bartender. "It happens." "No, it's not fine," he insisted, taking my hand in both of his. "Let me make it up to you. Dinner tomorrow night? That French place in Brickell? My treat." Of course I said yes. He was handsome, successful, and clearly interested in me. The next 3 months were a carefully staged romance that I now recognize as classic predation. Flowers were delivered to my office every Monday without fail. Surprise weekend trips to Key West, with him driving my car because the Porsche he'd taken me out in the first time was in the shop waiting for parts. Long late-night texts telling me I was the most captivating woman he had ever met. He remembered the wine I liked, knew how I took my coffee, and seemed genuinely invested in the challenges of my business. By the 4th month, he said one evening on my patio, looking out over the pool at sunset, "Why maintain 2 households when we're together every night anyway? Victoria, I want to take care of you. You've worked so hard for so long. You deserve a partner to share the burden." He would shoulder his share of the responsibility. Those words should have set off alarms, but I was too intoxicated by the illusion of partnership to see the scheme hidden beneath it. When I suggested we keep our finances separate and consult my financial advisor before merging any accounts, his expression changed, just for a moment, from warmth to wounded. "Love, why do we need lawyers and accountants involved?" he asked, his voice dropping into a hurt whisper. "Wouldn't that ruin the romance of what we're building? I trust you completely. Don't you trust me?" "I do trust you, but this is just practical." "I have substantial assets," he cut in smoothly. "Stock portfolios, cryptocurrency, several international investments. They're all temporarily tied up in a liquidity event, but once that clears, I'll buy you a villa in Tuscany. Can't we just enjoy being together without all this red tape? He made me feel petty for wanting to protect my assets, as if I were the one benefiting from this marriage, not him. So I stopped asking questions. I added him as an authorized user on one of my credit cards for household expenses and emergencies only. Household expenses somehow included designer suits and golf club memberships. Emergencies apparently meant ordering drinks at nightclubs. I let him turn my living room into a home. Office because he needed a conducive environment for high-level trading and contract negotiations. I ignored the warning signs because the illusion was too comfortable, and admitting I'd been deceived meant admitting I'd been foolish. The truth revealed itself the way truth usually does, through written evidence that could no longer be ignored. My email inbox chimed. A message from Lauren, my executive assistant, and the person I was closest to at work. She wrote, "The forensic accountant has completed the deep investigation. You were right about everything. It's actually worse than you thought. The report has been compiled and is ready to send to Rebecca whenever you give the signal." Seeing me stay silent, she gently asked, "Are you okay?" "Blake called the office this morning asking about your schedule. I told him you hadn't finalized your week yet. Do you want me to delay him?" What I had once understood as his concern for my schedule, I now recognized clearly as control. I replied immediately, "Send everything to Rebecca right away. And Lauren, cancel all of my appointments for the rest of the week. I have personal matters to handle." I had made a decision. I didn't cancel his credit cards. I didn't confront him again. I called a private investigator named Ryan Vance, a former military intelligence officer who now ran a small firm specializing in infidelity and fraud cases. 2 days later, while Blake was supposedly closing deals in South Beach, Ryan sent me a secure link to a cloud folder. I locked my bedroom door, put on my headphones, and opened the files. The photos appeared first. Blake at a beachside bar, wearing the linen shirt I had bought him, his arm draped around a young woman, probably no older than 25. She was wearing a bikini that cost more than my monthly rent used to, her hand resting possessively on his thigh. Caption: Tiffany Miller, 24. Personal trainer. 3 months behind on rent for her studio apartment in Wynwood. A series of images followed, of them drinking, laughing, kissing on the balcony of a hotel. Then came the video files. I clicked on the one labeled Patio Enhanced Audio. Blake and Tiffany were sitting at an outdoor restaurant overlooking the ocean, the sunset bathing everything in gold, a scene carefully designed to look romantic. "She's such a nuisance," Tiffany said, her voice full of complaint. "Always obsessing over money. When are you going to leave her? You promised me before summer. I'm sick of living in that dump while you play husband and wife with her." "I can't leave yet," Blake said, leaning back in his chair. "If I leave now, I get nothing. I signed a prenuptial agreement, remember? If I walk away with nothing." I paused the video, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. We had a prenuptial agreement. It was the single smartest decision I had made before marrying him, one my lawyer had insisted on despite Blake's wounded protests about trust and romance. I hit play again. "So, what's the plan?" Tiffany pressed. "I don't want to live forever as your mistress." "We wait," Blake said, his voice turning cold and calculated. "I'll break her down. I'll push her until she collapses. My lawyer says that if I can prove she's emotionally unstable, or if I can pressure her into signing a post-nuptial agreement that voids the original prenup, we'll win. I just need to make her believe the marriage is failing because of her. Make her desperate to save it. Then she'll sign anything." He lifted his glass and stirred the ice. "Women like Victoria, successful, older, afraid of being alone. They'll pay any price to keep a man around. A few more months of threatening to leave, being distant, making her feel worthless, and she'll hand over the house and the business just to prove I'll stay. Then we file for divorce anyway, take everything, and kick that old hag out of the house." I yanked the headphones off and threw them onto the floor. That miserable old hag. break her down, make her feel worthless. I sat there in my office, in the business I had built, in the house my parents had entrusted to me, and felt something shift inside me. The pain and betrayal crystallized into something harder, sharper, more dangerous. I was no longer just a wife. I was a target, a mark, a con. And Blake Donovan had made a fatal mistake in underestimating exactly who he was trying to destroy. When I finally steadied myself, I called the only person who could help me now. Rebecca, this is Victoria Harrington. I need you. And I need you to be the shark everyone says you are and help me destroy the man who thought I was weak. There was a brief pause. Then she replied, I've been waiting for this call. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring everything you have. Rebecca Langford's office was on the 40th floor of a glittering tower downtown, a space whose monthly rent was higher than most people's mortgage payments. When I walked in the morning, after discovering Blake's betrayal, I was no longer the broken woman who had listened to her husband plot to destroy her life. I was the founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and I was ready for war. Rebecca met me in her private office, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a sweeping view of the city. She was in her early 50s, dressed sharply in a navy suit, dark hair pulled into a neat bun, sharp eyes that missed nothing. I laid out the evidence: the investigators' photos and videos, the credit card statements, the bank records showing how Blake had drained my finances over 4 years. She reviewed everything in silence, occasionally making notes with a red pen. Finally, she looked up. He's sloppy, she said. Greedy and sloppy. The affair alone would be grounds for divorce, with you keeping everything protected by the prenuptial agreement. But he wants more than that, doesn't he? I want him to feel what I felt, I said. I want him to believe he's won. I want him confident enough not to see the trap until it's too late. Rebecca smiled. A cold, professional smile that told me I'd come to the right person. Then we need to talk about the Harrington family trust. My heart started to race. 2 years ago, when we restructured your assets for tax purposes, we transferred the house and most of your liquid assets into the Harrington family trust. Do you remember signing those documents? I vaguely did. It had been during a meeting about minimizing tax liability and protecting my assets from potential business risks. The house is no longer in your name, Victoria. It's owned by the trust. You are the sole beneficiary and trustee, which means you control it completely, but legally, you are not the personal owner. Understanding began to dawn. That means, Rebecca continued, when Blake pressures you to sign over the house, technically you'll be signing over something you do not personally own. The trust is the owner. And do you remember the spousal waiver Blake signed 2 years ago? I did. A meeting room, Blake scrolling on his phone while a legal assistant slid documents across the table. He signed a waiver acknowledging the trust, I said slowly. He signed a legal document confirming that he understood the house and your business interests were being placed into a family trust, of which you are the sole beneficiary, and that he waived any claim to those assets. Rebecca's eyes lit up. He acknowledged, under oath and before a notary, that he has no ownership interest in the assets held by the trust. He doesn't know this, I said. He doesn't know anything. He sees the house he lives in and assumes it's in your name. He thinks if he can pressure you into signing a post-nuptial agreement, he can take it. But you cannot transfer what you do not own. I leaned back, my mind spinning with the implications. So if I sign his post-nuptial agreement, your agreement to transfer assets you have no authority to transfer is meaningless. But if Blake then attempts to claim ownership, tries to take possession, or uses the house as collateral, he is attempting to defraud the trust. Combined with evidence of his affair and his extortion, threatening you to sign under pressure, we have grounds for criminal charges, not just divorce. What do we need to do to make this happen? We let him win, Rebecca said. We let him think he's broken you. You sign his papers, you leave, and then we watch him try to seize assets you never had the right to give him. The moment he acts on those fraudulent documents, and he will, because men like Blake can't help themselves, We charge him with fraud, extortion, and theft. What do I need to do? Exactly what you've been doing. Play the woman who collapses under pressure. Let him issue the ultimatum, sign it, walk away, and then let me handle the rest. The next day, I performed as if I deserved an Oscar. I stopped wearing makeup. I let dishes pile up in the sink. I even forgot to hire the gardener. Meanwhile, I deliberately left a folder on my desk titled Asset Valuation. Inside were documents showing the house had increased in value to $10 million, and the business held more than $2 million in liquid assets. Then, I accidentally left my office door open, and when I returned, I saw the folder had been moved. That evening, I checked the security camera footage and saw Blake photographing every page, then texting the images to someone. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for him to spring it. The morning of the ultimatum. It was 7 a.m. on Thursday. I was still in my workout clothes, black leggings and a sweat-wicking jacket, my hair in a ponytail, about to make coffee and answer a few emails before showering. Instead, I heard Blake call out, "We need to have a serious talk this morning," he declared. "I've been thinking about our future, about how to fix the problems between us." My husband, Blake. He was sitting in my leather executive chair, a silk robe draped loosely over a t-shirt, bare feet propped on the edge of my polished wooden desk, looking exactly like a man who owned the place. "Sign the papers or get out." My husband's voice was flat, almost bored, as he delivered the ultimatum from behind my mahogany desk. When I looked at the words on the page, I was genuinely stunned by the sheer audacity. "What do you mean, Blake?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. Blake leaned back in the chair, lacing his fingers behind his head, as if posing for a men's lifestyle magazine. He was 42, with carefully styled hair I once found so attractive, wearing the expensive silk robe I had bought him for Christmas last year. "Read it," he replied. "Marriage is a partnership. 50-50. But since you've been so difficult about supporting my business ventures and respecting my role in this family, it's time we reassessed our arrangement." He tapped the stack of papers between us. "This is a post-nuptial agreement," he continued, his tone condescending, like he was explaining something simple to someone slow. "It grants me ownership of this house and 50% controlling interest in your design firm. That's fair, considering the emotional support I've provided you over the past 4 years." I almost laughed out loud. Emotional support. This was the man who had forgotten my birthday 3 years in a row. The man who had spent 4 years systematically draining my bank accounts without contributing a single dollar to household expenses. "And what if I refuse to sign?" I asked, moving slowly toward the desk. His eyes tracked every movement with hunger. He mistook my calm for surrender, my silence for weakness. "Then I'll file for divorce," he said simply. "And Victoria, I promise you, I will make you suffer. I'll drag this out for years. I'll freeze your assets. I'll destroy your reputation. My lawyer says I have solid grounds for substantial spousal support. After all, I've become accustomed to a certain standard of living during our marriage. I deserve to maintain it." He spread his arms wide, as if presenting the room, the house, my entire life as evidence. "But if you sign this," he continued, his voice dropping into the same seductive tone he used when he first pursued me, "we stay married. We work things out together. I just need security, sweetheart. I need to know my future is protected." Security. He wanted security. The man who had squandered $300,000 of my money in 2 years wanted to lecture me about security. I looked down at the document. The language was clumsy, clearly drafted in haste by the strip mall attorney he played poker with twice a month. Transfer of ownership, assignment of equity, irrevocable rights to all real property. The words blurred before my eyes, but the intent was clear. He wanted the deed to the house my parents had left me, the stunning 6-bedroom home with a pool and gardens, located in one of the most exclusive gated communities just outside Miami, worth around $10 million. He also wanted half of Victoria Harrington Interiors, the company I had built from nothing, now valued at over $2 million with steady annual revenue. He wanted to take everything I had built, everything I had inherited, and he truly believed he deserved it for having stood beside me for 4 years. I studied him carefully, really looked at him for the first time in months. The skin around his jaw had gone soft from too much expensive scotch and too little actual work. A slight belly, despite the costly gym membership he rarely used. And in his eyes, beneath the fake charm, there was a hardness, a cruelty I had pretended not to see. "So it's either the house and the business, or a broken marriage?" I asked, my finger lightly tracing the edge of the desk. "I just want assurance, Victoria," he corrected, his eyes locked on the heavy fountain pen resting on the desk near my hand. "Sign it, and everything goes back to normal." "Everything will be fine. Don't sign. And I promise you'll regret it. I'll make you lose everything by any means necessary." I picked up the pen, a Mont Blanc that had belonged to my father, one of the few personal items of his I still had. The gold nib caught the morning light. My heart should have been pounding. I should have felt fear, anger, or despair. Instead, something strange happened. A cold, crystal-clear calm settled over me, along with the intense focus I used to feel before stepping into high-stakes client presentations worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. "All right, Blake," I said softly. "You win." His eyes widened slightly. He clearly hadn't expected surrender so quickly. "Good girl," he said, leaning forward so fast the leather chair creaked. "You're making the smart choice, sweetheart. This is better for both of us." I uncapped the pen. I didn't hesitate. I bent over the paper and signed my name, Victoria Ann Harrington, with a firm, deliberate stroke at the bottom of every page, where the small gold dots indicated. The ink sank into the paper, dark and seemingly permanent. "Done," I said, snapping the pen closed with finality. Blake immediately snatched up the papers, scrutinizing every signature as if expecting them to vanish or reveal themselves as fake. His face glowed with satisfaction. "See?" he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "That wasn't so hard, was it? Now we're partners, equal partners." "Yes," I agreed. "That's what we're doing." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the house keys, the main key, the garage remote, and the security system fob, and dropped them onto the desk. They landed with a heavy metallic clatter that echoed through the quiet room. Then I slipped off my wedding ring, the platinum band with a small diamond that I had bought myself when Blake's credit card was declined at the jeweler. I placed it carefully beside the keys. "What are you doing?" Blake asked, confusion finally breaking through his arrogance. "You said sign or leave," I replied calmly. "I've signed. Now I'm leaving." "You don't have to go," he stammered, rising from my chair, still clutching the papers. "I didn't mean... We can celebrate this new agreement, have breakfast together, talk about our future." "Enjoy the house, Blake," I cut him off. "It's everything you ever wanted." I turned and walked out of the office, down the hallway lined with family photographs and original artwork my parents had collected over decades, through the foyer with its Italian imported marble floors, and out the front door into the warm Florida morning. I didn't take a suitcase. I didn't stop by the bedroom, didn't grab my laptop or anything else beyond my car keys, my phone, and my wallet. I simply walked to my car. The silver Porsche Cayenne Blake always complained was too flashy, even though I paid for it myself. Got in, started the engine, and drove through the gates of the community without looking back. As I merged onto the main road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Blake was standing at the upstairs window of what used to be our bedroom, holding the papers up against the glass, a radiant smile on his face, like a man who had just won the lottery. He had no idea what he had done. He had no idea that he had just signed the contract that would lead to his own destruction. The suite at the Ritz-Carlton felt surreal in its quiet luxury. I set my bag down on the marble-topped console and walked through the spacious living area to stand in front of the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking downtown. The city stretched out beneath me in all its chaotic splendor. Glass skyscrapers reflecting the morning sun, highways already choked with traffic. I should have been crying. I should have called my sister or my best friend, sobbing over what had just happened. Instead, I felt strangely numb, as if I were watching myself from a great distance. I had just left my home, left my marriage, left everything that, on paper, represented my entire net worth. And I felt nothing but a dull ache in my chest, one that had nothing to do with the house or the money. It was grief for the love and time I had lost. 4 years of my life given to a man who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with benefits. My phone vibrated almost immediately. I ignored it, walked to the bar, and poured myself a glass of wine. I caught my reflection in the mirror. 36 years old, hair messy from my run, no makeup, fine lines forming around my eyes from late nights and relentless projects. When had I started to look this tired? Eventually, I picked up the phone. There were 17 missed calls from Blake. 6 text messages, each more urgent than the last. "Where did you go?" "Victoria, this is ridiculous. Come home." "You're being childish." "Call me now." "Fine. If you want to act like this, then go." I placed the phone face down on the coffee table and opened my laptop. I had emails to send, calls to make, plans to set in motion. Because while Blake thought he had won, while he was probably already measuring my office to move his mistress in, I still had work to do. First, I opened the smart home app connected to the house's security system. The system had cameras and microphones in every room, all streaming to a secure cloud server only I could access. I pulled up the living room camera. Blake was pacing in front of the fireplace, holding a glass of my Macallan 25, the $500 bottle. He was on the phone, laughing loudly, gesturing wildly. I turned on the audio. "I'm telling you, Tiffany, she just walked out, left everything behind. The house is mine, the business is mine too. You should have seen her face when I laid it all out. She didn't even fight back. I told you, she's too weak to fight." He took a long drink. "Yeah, the prenup is void now. This postnup replaces everything. She signed over full control. My lawyer says we're completely in the clear." He paused, listening to Tiffany on the other end. "No, she's just stupid. She loves me too much. She's probably at her sister's place right now, crying and hoping I'll call and tell her to come home." Another sip. "I just scored $7 million with a single threat." I turned off the app. I had heard enough. I drove straight to Rebecca's office. "He took the bait," I said. "The papers are signed." "Excellent," she replied, already reaching for her phone. "I'll initiate eviction proceedings immediately. From this moment on, Blake Donovan is trespassing on trust property. I'll also freeze the joint accounts and notify his company that he no longer has access to the premises or the records." "He's at the house," I said. "He thinks it's his." "Technically, he's trespassing on private trust property," Rebecca said with a satisfied smile. "But let him celebrate his victory. The higher they climb, the harder they fall." My phone lit up with a flood of notifications from the smart home system. Front door unlocked, sound system activated, wine cellar opened, pool house occupied. On the video, I recognized her, Tiffany. His mistress had entered my house. "He brought her home," I said. "Even better," Rebecca replied. "That only strengthens our claim of emotional distress. Save the footage." I spent the rest of the day in Rebecca's office, watching on my phone as Blake and Tiffany threw a celebration at my house. They invited friends, opened my most expensive bottles of wine, took photos in my bedroom. Blake went live on Facebook, showing off his house to anyone who wanted to watch. I watched 20 strangers jump into my pool. I watched someone shatter my father's crystal wine glasses. I watched Blake pour my father's vintage Bordeaux into red plastic cups. By 10 o'clock the next morning, Blake's credit cards had been locked. The vehicle registered in my name had been reported for repossession. All streaming services and subscriptions I had been paying for were canceled. The joint checking account had been drained down to the legally required minimum. Then I logged into the smart home system and created a new routine. Turn off all lights in the house, lock all exterior doors, disable garage access, remove Blake Donovan from the list of authorized users. I pressed execute. On my phone screen, I watched the party come to an abrupt halt as the house went dark and the doors locked tight. I saw Blake frantically try his codes, his keys, call the security company, only to be told he was not authorized to make changes. I watched him try to call an Uber with a credit card that had been declined. I saw his phone light up with message after message from Tiffany, demanding to know what was happening. Then I turned off the feed and slept better than I had in years. The morning everything ended for Blake began with a knock on the door of my house. The house where he had spent the night outside, because he had nowhere else to go after being locked out. The process server handed him a thick envelope, an eviction notice from the Harrington Family Trust, a restraining order signed by Judge Harmon, and documents proving that every asset he thought he had gained control of had never belonged to him. I watched on the security camera as Blake's face drained of color while he read the papers. I watched him call his lawyer, watched them argue, and watched his lawyer explain that Blake had signed a spousal waiver 2 years earlier, explicitly stating he had no claim to trust assets. By noon, the police had been called. Deputy Wilder, who had known my family for 20 years, stood at the entrance to my house reading the legal documents while Blake tried to plead his case. "Sir, according to these documents, you do not reside here," the deputy said. "You have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings. After that, if you return, you will be arrested for trespassing." "This is my house," Blake shouted. "She signed it over to me." "She signed over property she did not own," Deputy Wilder said. "That was when I arrived. I drove up in the Porsche, Rebecca in the passenger seat. When I saw the look on Blake's face, it almost made up for 4 years of pain. "Victoria," he said, his voice suddenly desperate. "Please." "This is a misunderstanding. Tell them we're married. Tell them I live here." I removed my sunglasses and looked him straight in the face, the man who had thought he could break me, con me, discard me like trash. "We are married, Blake," I said calmly. "For now. But you are trespassing on trust property. Deputy Wilder is here to escort you off the premises. You have 30 minutes. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, and for the first time I heard real fear in his voice. "Victoria, we're husband and wife." Rebecca stepped forward with a file in her hands. "Mr. Donovan, you have been served divorce papers on the grounds of infidelity and fraud. The restraining order prohibits you from contacting Miss Harrington or approaching any property owned by the Harrington Family Trust. Violation will result in immediate arrest." Blake looked between us, finally realizing he had been played from the very beginning. "You planned this," he said. "You let me think I'd won." "I didn't plan anything," I corrected. "You did. I just documented it." Wilder escorted him inside. 30 minutes later, Blake emerged with 2 garbage bags of clothes and a tub of protein powder. Everything else, the designer suits I had bought, the electronics, the expensive watch he'd purchased with my card, stayed behind. Blake's mother arrived in her old beat-up Honda, the car I had bought for her in the first year of our marriage. I watched them drive away, then turned and walked back into the house. It reeked of stale beer and cheap perfume. My cream-colored carpet was stained with red wine. The patio furniture was scorched with cigarette burns. Trash was scattered everywhere. But it was mine. Finally, completely, and legally mine. I stood in the middle of the living room and felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Freedom. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom and watched Blake be sentenced to 18 months in prison for fraud and ordered to repay the money he had stolen, a debt he would never be able to pay. Tiffany tried to pawn my jewelry and was arrested. She immediately turned on Blake, providing testimony about his plan to defraud me. The divorce was finalized. Blake walked away with nothing. No money, no property, no second chances. I kept everything: the business, the house, my self-respect. That evening, I hosted a dinner party at the estate. Rebecca was there, along with Lauren and a few other friends who had stood by me through the worst of it. We ate on my mother's china, drank fine wine, and laughed in a home that finally felt warm again. We raised our glasses, and I looked around at the faces of the people who truly deserved a seat at my table, not by marriage, blood, or proximity, but by loyalty, competence, and genuine care. After that night, I chose a small village perched on the hills of Valdaortia, where silvery olive fields shimmered under the autumn sun, and red dirt roads wound like the faded ribbons of time. The stone house I rented had just 3 rooms, windows opening onto misty morning valleys, the scent of bay leaves and damp earth drifting in whenever the wind shifted. I brought no schedule, no urgent work calls, no notifications from Lauren, no messages from the past. Just a small suitcase, a few old books, and the film camera my father used to photograph my mother on their long-ago trips. Each morning, I woke before dawn, had a chance to blush the sky. I made coffee in an old Italian mocha pot, sat on the cold stone steps, listened to the rustle of leaves and the slow tolling of distant church bells. I stopped checking my phone. I simply watched clouds drift lazily across the deep blue sky, and for the first time in many years, I breathed without feeling my chest tighten. One late autumn evening, as sunset set the entire valley ablaze in red, and the air carried the scent of smoke from the first fireplaces of winter, I stood on the highest hill in the village, cool wind moving through my hair, now grown long again. Below me, the first lights of the houses shimmered like stars fallen to earth. I spread my arms, letting the wind slip through my fingers, through the thin wool of my sweater, through the heart that had once curled in on itself in fear. And I knew, deep in my chest, that true peace had finally arrived. I was no longer a woman running from loneliness into a false marriage. I was no longer a target, no longer prey. I was simply Victoria, a woman who had learned how to stand alone in a vast world, and who understood that freedom is not having no one beside you, but no longer being afraid when it's just yourself. And if you've ever stood at the edge of a life that no longer felt safe, if you've ever mistaken fear for love or silence for peace, know this: you are not weak for leaving, and you are not selfish for choosing yourself. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need it tonight. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from.